All right, there we go. And we are live. Thanks again for folks that just logged on or want to hear me give another intro. I'm Kim Lundin, a she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of the Oregon Cannabis Association. This is our December virtual happy hour. It's going to be a conversation today, a little bit of a fireside chat style conversation on enforcement reform. I want to give a big shout out to the OCA's membership committee for getting the word out about this event. We had 80 people RSVP'd, which is really exciting for me. As I said, today's conversation is going to be a little bit more presentationable, more video, and you will be able to ask your questions through the Zoom Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your screen. Next month, we are really excited. Our memberships committee is working hard on a way to get everyone together so that we can network a little bit before the presentation. So I'm not supposed to give too much away about that away right now, so I should stop talking. But stay tuned. Next month, we're going to all see each other's faces. It's going to be very exciting. Today's conversation is going to be about enforcement reform, as I said before. We have some questions that were pre-submitted and put together by our Enforcement Reform and Licensing Committee. Thanks to those folks for all the work they've done, both to put this event together and more importantly, the work they've done over the last few months to work with the agency on enforcement reform, creating a system that works better for the businesses, more in partnership, more with more solution-based, less punitive-based. So thanks to those folks. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't let you know that the committee membership is open to all OCA members. And if you are interested in any of our committees or membership, let me know. One more announcement about today's event. We had scheduled for Rich Evans to join us. Unfortunately, he is feeling ill today, so he was not able to come. He sends his regrets and his best wishes. And we send him right back to him, hoping that he feels better soon. But he did send us and ask for Shannon Hoffeditz to come, who is the Director of Compliance for the OLCC. Shannon and I had a chance to chat a little bit before this event. Happy to say that she's on the same page as Rich, and that as we all are, about how the agency and licensees can work together for a better system that works for all of us. So I'm really excited to welcome Shannon to our conversation. Shannon, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
Do you want to, I gave you just, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit to the group?
Yeah, I will. And first of all, I just want to reiterate what Kim says. I know that Rich has expressed that the work that he has done with this group has been invaluable to the work that our agency has been doing. And so his regrets on not being here. On a positive note, as I was explaining to Kim earlier, I do work side by side with Rich. He is in fact my direct supervisor. So we have been hearing everything that the wonderful work that he has been conducting with this group, and some of the work that has been implemented that we're going to talk about today. But a little bit about me for those of you that are not aware. I've been at the agency for about 25 years, in the compliance division for about 20. So I've seen the spectrum swing both ways instead of, in terms of higher priority on enforcement, scaling back to education, higher priority towards enforcement. And now what we really are focusing on are partnerships. And so I feel like it shouldn't be education-based and it shouldn't be violation-based. It needs to be a partnership. And that's really what we're working on. And with this group, I'm excited to share with some of the work that we've done. And as the Director of Compliance, which Rich does support, is, for those of you that have heard me speak before, is that our goal in the compliance division is to help licensees be successful. We're not out to license somebody and get them out of business. I know that there is the perception that sometimes it does feel that way, but our goal is to help people thrive and help them be successful in the recreational marijuana industry in Oregon. I've been an inspector. On the alcohol side, I just started dabbling on the marijuana side in the field, became regional manager and now the director of compliance. So I have actually been out in the field working with licensees, and my biggest success on the alcohol side, because that's where my experience really is from, is partnering with licensees. And I will say that the licensees that I work with that unfortunately I've had to issue sanctions against, none of those sanctions were ever a surprise to the licensee. They understood that they were getting them and why they were getting them. And that is the philosophy, and that is what we're trying to instill into our inspector staff on both the alcohol and the marijuana side. I'm actually very happy to report that right before I came on to this meeting, I got a phone call from a licensee that I have known for years, and he was giving me positive reviews about he's really noticed a change with with an inspector that he has versus previous inspectors. So that just goes to show that we can't snap our fingers and make it happen, but we are striving and taking steps that direction, and that is the direction that we want to go. So I'm happy to be here and have a discussion with Kim about where we're going and what we're doing and what we have done.
That's great. That's great to hear, Shannon. I love that idea of like coming together to help us thrive. And that's really what we're trying to do, right? Is build the most awesome, the most successful and compliant, safe, because due to safety, industry we can for organs cannabis. So I'm excited. This event came out of just some conversations that I had with Rich about his ideas around compliance that came after the work groups we had, which I'll talk more about over the summer. And now for today, we're going to start off with a little intro about verification of compliance, or the VOC, as we will call it, talking about what it means, how it's been implemented, and then where we see it growing, or we hope to see it growing. I want to reiterate that although this is more of a fireside chat, more presentational style, doesn't mean we're not listening to you. These questions that I have some questions already pre-put together that were put together by Enforcement Reform Committee, but you can also ask your questions to me in real time. There is a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. You can plug those in. I can't promise we'll get to every question, but I promise I'll do my darndest to get to them. So without any further ado, Shannon, let's just jump right into the VOC. I think for those that don't quite know, can you just give a quick outline of what the program is? And I'm really curious, it's been implemented for maybe a little over a month now. I'm curious on how it's going for the agency right now.
Yeah, so first of all, during my intro, I talked about the work that Rich has done with this group. And, I being involved in helping with the implementation of the program, I really wasn't aware that I knew Rich was meeting with the industry. And, again, I did some quick research on what the work that Rich had done prior to presenting today. And I do know I was able to look at a couple of memos that were a result of the work groups that this group, the Enforcement Reform Group, did put together. I know that Rich et al., the VOC work group, did review the work and the concerns that this group had. And so based on the work that was done with this group and the meetings that Rich had, there were three things that were really evident in terms of reform. And that was, we really wanted to limit license cancellations. I think it's no surprise that there are a lot of license cancellations that are fixable. And I talk with my hands a lot, so you're going to see this happening.
That's good. That's good for the video.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of license cancellations that, inspectors would go out, they would see that there were violations happening. They were Category 1 violations, which are cancelable offenses. And then we were seeing a majority of these that were being settled. And so there's that component. And so we wanted to, the number one goal and the number one priority was limit those license cancellations. We wanted to implement this program, which is a ticket that you can fix. It started out as the fix-it ticket, and then we created what we're calling the verification of compliance, which is essentially what it ended up being. And then we also, as I have been saying, is we want to build a culture of trust between our agency and the industry. So that is the scope of the program in terms of verification of compliance that we really focused on. And again, it goes without saying that it's the work that this committee and this group worked on putting together and submitted to our agency through Rich Evans. So I want to applaud everybody for the communication. It was very effective. I did read the memos, they were great. And there were some very good points that were brought forward that our agency took seriously. And I don't think our work is done. I think there is still some work to do. What that looks like, I think we're going to have some future discussions on that. I wish I had a crystal ball, but you know, there's always work to do. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to interrupt because I can't help myself. I just really, I'm glad you brought that up about the cancellations and then noticing that they were settled. I think that was something our members found frustration with, is like the process and the time that it goes through to go through that process to have it eventually settled. So I think for both licensees being able to focus on their businesses, and for the agency being able to focus on the work that they would really like to do, it's great to hear that you came up with a solution that helps mitigate some of that time.
Yeah, the other thing too that we were noticing is with the case presenters that actually put the notices together, we didn't get additional staff right out of the chute right away to help with the additional caseload for marijuana. So unfortunately, our administrative hearings division has fallen behind. And so that's another piece of frustration with the industry that we understand and that we are working towards resolving. We're hoping that this verification of compliance will help clean up and get some of those cases through, as well as prevent some of those cases for even reaching the administrative hearings division to begin with. So we're hoping that this is going to be the start of a new beginning, so to speak.
And can you let us know, how is the program going? I know it's only been like a month or so, but is it working well for the agency? Have you heard feedback from licensees?
Well, I can tell you that with the inspector group, we invited both the marijuana and the alcohol inspectors to listen in, and the inspectors were very positive, and the alcohol inspectors are pushing forward on the alcohol side. I mean, that's how positive it is. We're not there yet, and we're not.
Are you saying we're trendsetters?
Yes, is that what you're saying? I am. Love it. But it is going very well. One of the things I want to talk about is, now, Kim, I don't know if you want to talk about the process of what it looks like now or how it's going for our agency. But I will say for our agency, it's positive. We've issued 8 of them so far across the state. If we weren't in this pandemic right now, I have a feeling that we would be out in the field a lot more utilizing this program. I can't wait for this pandemic to go away for us to be able to be out and conducting our standard visits as we normally do. Right now, I can honestly say we're going out as needed. We are still going out in the field, but the visits that we were routinely doing, we're just being as safe as we can right now, doing what we need to do in the field. But it is going positive for our agency, and the inspectors are very happy with it. The industry that we've worked with, the licensees, seem to be very happy with it as well.
That's great. That's good to hear. And I know that this was maybe unofficially happening with some inspectors in some cases, and it's great to hear that this is now like a statement from the agency saying that this is part of our process. And we'll talk more about how we're hoping that will expand. But I think just is like setting that precedent of focusing on helping us improve and not necessarily going to penalizing right away, I think is fantastic. And I'm excited to see that grow. you circle me back because I tend to go off track. Do you want to explain real quick the process of the VOC program before we get too deep?
Yes, I do. Yeah, so the one thing I'm going to express the partnership and the work that we're doing with our licensees, and I feel like this program is really a good step in that direction. So, for example, I actually am going to attempt to share my screen.
Oh, great.
So, bear with me. I saw it on here.
Well, it should be at the bottom. And speaking of the bottom, while you're figuring that out, Shannon, folks that are watching right now, if you have any questions as we're talking, there is a Q&A feature that you can hit, and you should be able to plug in a question.
I don't see share screen. Oh, there it is. I see it.
We're all going to be Zoom pros by the time we can all meet in person again. And there should be a pop. Oh, there you go.
Nope, that's not it. So you have to have it open, right?
You do have to have it open. And then when you hit share screen at the bottom, a white box should pop up with everything you have open. I, for example, have about 20 things open right now. And then you just click on the screen that you want to share. If it's a web page, you need to have that web page up.
Yeah, it's not. I will, and I knew I had to have it open. Let me see.
Bear with everyone. This is a good time to grab your happy hour drink. If you
please do.
Celebrate making it to 5 p.m. on a Wednesday, which is a big deal, I think, in pandemic times.
Good golly, this is horrible.
You can also email it to me if that would make it easier, Shannon.
Well, now I need to find it.
While she's looking, just to recap our format for today, we have some questions we're going to talk about how the program works, which we're looking at right now. Then we're going to look into, hopefully, how we can expand the program. And then we had some questions from our Enforcement Reform Committee about the violation process and licensees' rights during that process. Some really good stuff there. And we also have time at the end to answer your questions. So one more plug for that Q&A link. I shouldn't say one more. I'll plug it again. But there's a Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen. You can plug in your questions there.
So I have it, this is really bad. I'm just going to email it to you.
Great. And then once you get that sent off, I can you can chat and I'll get it up and going pretty quick.
Perfect. Okay, so I think it's important that everybody sees what the form looks like, because I talk about the partnership and the work that we're doing with each other. And so the agency, what we did was we took a poll and we actually looked at the number of violations that we had forwarded over to our Administrative Hearings Division, and how many of those were actually settled, and what those violations were. And so we determined that there were several of the violations that were actually fixable and easily fixable, but did they necessarily fit into the right category or not? That's something that we didn't feel like, they necessarily did fit into the category. For example, camera coverages, camera coverage. And I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. For example, the camera coverage, if it's something that could be fixed and there's no evidence of diversion, working on with a licensee to get that issue resolved in a period of time. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about inspector discretion. I know that that's kind of that's one of the things that you guys really wanted to talk about today, one of the topics. So in verification of compliance, Kim, if you don't mind scrolling down.
Happy to.
Yep. So when an inspector goes to a business and discovers that there is an issue that fits within the verification of compliance program, it's one of those 6 violations that you'll notice here in this heading. So before the inspector even leaves the business, they're going to leave this document with the representative at the licensed premises. So you're going to know, you're not going to have to wait any period of time. You're going to know right there when the inspector leaves what the expectations are. So at the top, the license information, trade name, address, all of that information, maybe not the case number, but the inspector's name will be there. That portion will be completed. The violations that the inspector detected will be completed. There's an option on here for violations or the corrective action required, just for the inspector to provide some additional notes if needed. And this is the next section I want you all to look at, is the corrective action required time frame. There's a 10, 30, or 60-day timeline that the licensee will have to complete the compliance portion of this. And so here, this is where it's important. This is where the inspector works with the licensee to determine how much time does the licensee need to fix what the deficiencies are. And so you'll see on here that the inspector signs, and then the licensee or the representative also signs. And so there is an agreement at the business before the licensee or before the inspector even leaves. So the agreement is made, it's in conjunction with you, it's in partnership with you, and you guys come to an agreement before the inspector leaves the premises. So then if you scroll down again, Kim, yeah, there should be a blank page. So this is what was sent off to the printer. So if you scroll down again, keep going. So this is the back of the document. This is what is left with you. You get a copy of the front page, and then on the back of the document is directions to the licensee. So it's very clear that the licensee fix it. You have the option of 10, 30, or 60 days. The form is signed below. If you scroll down, Kim, you'll see that the licensee signs and attests that the deficiency has been corrected. It's forwarded to it's sent by the licensee to the designated email address. I believe it's like olcc.voc@oregon.gov. And I think most folks are familiar with who Mandy is, but she is comparing the corrections that come in, these documents that come in and resolved, with the original document that was submitted at the time that they were submitted to the licensee. So there's not really even a report that is done. What does happen, however, is if the licensee does not meet the 10, 30, or 60-day timeline, it goes back out to the issuing inspector for follow-up regarding why wasn't the deficiency fixed and corrected, and then there will be an investigation completed, like before we ever had the VOC program, there will be an investigation completed as to why it wasn't completed or what occurred.
Great. I'm going to jump in. I have a couple questions myself, and I'm going to jump in with our first 2 questions from the Q&A.
Okay.
First one from Tom. Am I understanding that the time frame to fix is a choice of the licensee? Tom, that was my question too. Can the inspector weigh in on the change? So going up here to the timeline where you select 10, 30, or 60 days. Is that where the discretion piece comes in? How much freedom do we have there?
It's an agreement between the inspector and the licensee. So there is a little bit of freedom, yes, with the licensee. I mean, if it's a simple fix and the licensee says they can get it done in 10 days, that's where the inspectors are working with the licensee. I mean, we're not going to say, oh, you have 10 days to try to find a contractor that's really rare to find right now to come in here and fix a door or add cameras. I mean, we're going to try to really be reasonable, and we, really want the licensee to work with us and let them know how quickly can you fix this. I mean, that's really what the goal is here.
Got it. And what about, we all are used to the world going one way and then all of a sudden flipping upside down and going a totally different way. Is there something built into the system where, say there's a pandemic and all of a sudden your contractor can't get out to you for 90 days? Is there some way to let you officially make formal notice that you need more time?
That hasn't come up yet, and I'm not going to say yes, and I'm not going to say no. I think what we would do is we would evaluate the circumstances and go on from there. I mean, again, this is a new program, and as these issues come up, I would really, and that's one thing I'll talk to the management team about, is as issues come up regarding and surrounding the pandemic, it's nothing to ignore, and it's something that we need to evaluate and go forward. And I would also say too that, Kim has a great relationship with Director Evans. And so I really would encourage you all, if you're hearing things out there as well, pass them up to Kim, and let us know what you're hearing and what the concerns are. I really do enjoy this platform. I know, again, Rich has said great things about the things that he has heard, and it's really helped our compliance program.
Great. Yeah. And thanks for that association plug there. And I mean, it's really, and I think that's been part of our work is we feel like the more we can do to bring everyone together, and it wasn't just the OCA that did, that came together. We really worked, what we did was we worked hard to bring everyone together. So yes, anything that happens, I'm happy to send it up the chain for you. Two questions. Following back up on the time frame to fix something from Sunny, are these business days or calendar days?
They are calendar days. That is a very good question, Sunny. Thank you.
Great question, Sunny. And then this one is anonymous, and I'm not sure exactly what they're referring to, but I think it kind of leads into some of our questions about what happens about things that don't fit into these violations. The question is, there are some equipment camera failure rules that are not subject to the VOC, but overlap with rules that are subject to the VOC. If the violation can be corrected, is the OLCC willing to change the violation to one that fits under the VOC? That one might be a little bit, we might need a little more.
I can actually expand on that. So yeah, what I can tell you is that there are going to be violations that fit into these categories, and those we clearly can do VOC. Our policy currently is that VOC can only be applied to these designated policies or these designated rules. And so if there are additional violations detected that do not fall within these categories, we would also do a violation and then go forward. Well, we'd write a report and then go forward that way. And then depending on the totality of the circumstances, again, working with the manager and the inspector and the manager working together, they would determine the route that they would go forward. But I can tell you that if it falls within this category, it's a VOC. The other thing I want to be sure of is that you are eligible for a VOC for each of these violations once every 2 years. So if the Division 25, Section 1410, if that was utilized for a verification of compliance once on January 1st, 2020, it's not eligible for a verification of compliance again for another 2 years.
And is that per location? Is that Is that
Yeah, it's
covered?
for licensed premises.
Licensed premises, great.
Mhm.
Good to know. But again, if y'all have any questions about the world in general, plug them into the Q&A, and I'll do my best to get them answered on the live on the air. Shannon, is there anything else you want to go over with this form before we move on?
No, I would just ask, are there any questions on this document before we move on?
I think we're good. I think that's crickets. It's not the end though. If something comes to your mind, feel free to put it in that
Yes,
in that chat.
absolutely.
I'm stopping the share just so I can look at my notes. And I think we've talked a little bit already about what is covered. We saw that list there, and we've talked about the recommendations from the enforcement sub work group. And there's lots of one thing shout out to the agency, to the OLCC this summer. There's a big effort made to bring everyone together, and representing all associations, a lot of legal representation for licensees came together. Commissioners were on there as well to listen to what the industry's top concerns are. And what we did was we really tried to rally everyone, because in a growing, emerging market, there's lots of things that can be changed. But we felt there was two main concerns, and these were echoed by the rest of the industry, which was enforcement reform and licensing. Today we're talking about enforcement reform. There's also some really great work done to try to speed up and streamline licensing as well. So going back to that enforcement side of it, the request from the enforcement side, relating to what you said before, Shannon, about license cancellations, was that any license cancellation was limited to what we called major violations. And these were things that were focusing on diversion, intentionally selling to minors, commission of felonies, or intentionally lying to the OLCC. Mm-hmm. The hope was that everything else could be eligible for the VOC. And I know that there's some limitations. Rich and I talked a little bit about implementing a new program, and there's reasons he had to do just a few things at once. I'm curious how likely it is that we can see this program expand. That is that big picture idea possible? Are there regulatory problems in asking that question, that those four things are the only license cancellations?
I wouldn't say that it's out of the question. What I am going to say though is that what we did was we took our existing violations, as I mentioned about how we came up with the top 6 rules, how, basically we didn't want to start big and then mess it up. I mean, I think this is a very good starting point, starting small, and then the hope is that this is the foundation that we can build on. I just don't know what that timeline looks like. Again, it's really hard to evaluate this program when we've only issued 8 due to the pandemic and everything else crazy that's going on in 2020. But the goal is, once we get enough data to be able to look at this, and there's something else that's happening right now too that I want to talk about, is really figure out what direction in terms of this program we're going to go and what that's going to look like. I think the next step though is that we are looking at the violation reclassification project, because that was another issue, is are the violations classed in the appropriate classification? Right now we're looking at category 1 through 5 violations. Are the category 1 violations that are eligible for the VOC program, should those be true cancellation violations? And that's something that we're looking at. And so I actually did speak to our rules coordinator, because I think it's important to share what this process looks like. Is we took initial action on this recategorization just October 15th of this year. There's going to be an advisory committee in December or January. The legislative session is going to begin in January 2021. Let's see. Looks like there's, if folks are interested in being included in a RAC, the Rules Advisory Committee.
They're interested.
Yes. email address for you to send your request is olcc.rulemaking@oregon.gov. Again, olcc.rulemaking, all one word, @oregon.gov. So if you would like to be included in a rules advisory committee, please send your request to that email address to be considered.
That's great. And did you say January, February is the expected timeline for that RAC?
It looks like January, February, yes.
So just make sure I'm tracking correctly. I've been bouncing around a little bit. Once things are recategorized, that would make it easier to put more into the VOC program. Is that?
Well, yeah, I think the next step is to recategorize the rules and figure out where they land, and then hopefully we'll have some more data on the verification of compliance. But I can't guarantee. I don't know what the data is going to show going forward, whether or not there's going to be more added to the program or not. I'm not saying that it's out of the question. I don't know with this program being so new right now. I feel like it's a good start. And like I said, a good base. I can see us adding to it, but not until we get things recategorized and get some more data under our belt to evaluate which route to go.
What kind of data would you be looking for? Like, is this really preventing diversion, or is this really working? Do you know what you'd be looking at?
Yeah, I think what's important is to look at, are the licensees correcting making the corrections? Are we essentially having to go out and follow up on all of them because we're not getting information back from the licensees? Again, with only 8 out there, I think 4 have been resolved, and I think we're still waiting on 4. So I think that type of data, that type of information.
That's great. And is there anything you see, like, just besides like being our charming selves and being as quick to respond and send in paperwork as possible, is there anything we can do as licensees to help the program be successful?
I think everybody's doing a really good job. I know myself as well as my colleagues, we've been trying to spread the word. I've been speaking at some conferences about this program. I spoke at the commission about it. And I think it's really important communication. If there's any concerns, or if there's anything positive, anything negative, if there's any concerns with anything, I think it's really important that information gets relayed, and they can be sent to Rich, myself, Director Marks. It's just really important to hear what the concerns are and what's working for the industry. And I think the group, like I said, that worked together to bring the enforcement reform forward, I really think that was really effective, as I had said before.
Yeah, that's great. We appreciate the agency listening, and I so appreciate the industry coming together so we can present one unified voice. Mm-hmm. A couple more questions about the VOC program. I've lost track of our time, but who cares? Just to confirm back from when you said the two-year time frame, was that 2 years for each violation type, or 2 years for any VOC notification?
Yeah, it's for each one of those. So okay. if you had, I don't have it in front of me anymore, but
if you had a camera outage, you can't have another camera outage for 2 years, but you could have something else.
A metric issue.
Okay.
It's brand new.
That's great. And are you comfortable if we share this document that you emailed with me to the group?
I was actually thinking about that. Maybe we can talk offline a little bit.
Okay, we'll see. Well, I'll negotiate for y'all. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see about that. And this has come up for people because we all know there's been a backlog in processing complaints for folks, or processing violations, excuse me. Is the VOC retroactive? Does it apply to prior changes? One of our members, leadership circle members, who's a lawyer, had one of his clients ask about it, and the agency said, "Oh yeah, sure." So I'm wondering if that is something that can be made universal, or if it's a case by case basis. How are you looking at that?
So I actually was thinking about that, and so I communicated before this with our director of AHD and asked if existing cases are being looked at for VOC if they apply, and she said the answer was yes. And so I have noticed that some existing violations that did apply were reverted back to warnings, which is a positive. So I'm thinking that's how they're handling those. But again, without knowing specific cases, I do know that they are looking at the existing cases to see if they do fit within the VOC program and the list of violations.
Yeah. So what would be your advice to a licensee who's thinking, maybe I have something that could get changed, and maybe they don't have the same lawyer that's on our leadership circle? Would they talk to their inspector? Would they talk to me? What would you do if you're in their shoes?
Yeah. So if they have a charge letter that's been issued, I would, at the bottom of each charge letter, there's a case presenter. I would ask them if they, I would ask the case presenter if it's VOC eligible and if that would apply.
Okay, great, awesome, thanks. And then, yeah, I think that's good. Let me skim over my notes. I think, one, just anything we can do to help expand the program is really important. And I know our folks talk a lot about the racks and how you get on racks. And I think the agency has been trying to do more of this, and just like to say, to encourage more, like, we would love to be on that rack. And we are actually working, our enforcement reform committee, on our own recommendations for reclassification of the categories. And so violations, excuse me. So the more we can do to be involved, we're here for you. That's my plug for us.
Kim, what I will do is I'll email you a copy of that document that you can actually send out.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah, the ticket. Yeah, I'll send you probably tomorrow, by the end of the week, I'll send you a copy of one that you can send so everybody can see what it looks like.
Cool. That's great. Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll share this out with the group. We'll share that when we share the YouTube for folks as well. Before we get 2 more questions before we get off this portion of the VOC, and you talked about it a little bit already, and I just want to kind of circle us back to it because it is so important to our members, and it's that issue of discretionary versus non-discretionary. And it really comes up, I think the question is like whether something can be eligible for the VOC or whether it's automatically eligible. And sometimes at best it's just an issue of like a miscommunication or an inspector seeing things differently, or at worst it could be implicit bias or some deeper misunderstandings. I think, could you talk a little bit more about the discretionary element that was left in the VOC, and do you see that changing at all for the agency?
Yeah, so discretion is really tricky. I mean, so we don't want to be extreme one way or extreme another. There's that fine line that we really want to instill upon the inspectors of working with the licensees to help them be successful. And so what we look at is, so they're really, I don't ever want to say anything definitively because I'm going to say it and then tomorrow there's going to be this off the wall case that I never imagined would be imaginable. But the whole goal of the VOC is if a licensee is eligible through any of those 6 rules that you all saw, if there's no evidence of any public safety issue that's tied to it. So for example, if there's a camera issue, but there's no evidence of diversion, they would be eligible for the program. So it really goes to show, I think that has kind of taken a little bit of the discretion from the inspectors away, in that if the licensee meets one of those 6, I think there's a couple more because there's some subsections in there, but I think you guys understand what I'm saying. And if there's no underlying or outerlying factors that go along with it, then yeah, the licensee is going to be eligible. But if, like I said, if there's public safety issues tied to the to what the VOC violation is eligible for, then they wouldn't be eligible. But what I will tell you, and what we're trying to instill upon our inspectors, is that nothing should be a surprise to the licensee. If that is the case, then that is what should be communicated to the licensee, and the licensee should have a very clear understanding of why it is they're not eligible and the reason why they're not eligible. So that, to me, that's where the discretion of the inspectors come in. If somebody's not eligible for the VOC, there should be a very clear understanding from the inspector to the licensee why that's the case.
I like that. Like nothing should be a surprise. Everything should be a frank conversation. So you're saying
Correct.
You're saying there, if someone has something out, the licensee can say at the moment, or maybe they shouldn't even have to say. They say this is not going to be a VOC because we have a public safety concern.
Yeah, that is correct. And the public safety concern should be explained, as to why. I mean, for example, I'm just throwing something out there. So for example, there's a camera closed down, but yet metric is all jacked up and there's been complaints. So, I mean, there'd be probably a larger investigation, but, every investigation is a little bit different. And the bottom line of what I'm trying to say is that nothing should be a surprise to the licensee. And I know that licensees have been surprised in the past. We have heard about that, and that we're trying to, that's part of why we implemented this, is to help the AHD caseload, to help the inspectors work with you more one-on-one and work together.
Yeah, that makes it. That makes sense. And getting like that, as much as we can get that commitment to like let folks know what's going on ahead of time, I think is helpful for both sides. Just a real quick question from the group. You mentioned outlying factors. Are those public safety concerns what you were talking about, or what specifically were you looking at?
Yeah, I mean, public safety concerns, if there's other, violations, if there's other issues that are going on at the location, it can be a number of things. I don't want to say it's just one, but it could be a totality of things that are happening that I honestly can't think of anything right now. But I've been around long enough on the alcohol side, and now going on 5 years on the marijuana side, to know that I'm still learning stuff on the alcohol side, and I'm going to continue to learn stuff on the marijuana side. So nothing ever surprises me when it comes to investigations. So I'm just going off of experience in terms of, I don't want to say that if A then B or if C then D. It just really depends on the totality of the investigation of what's occurring.
But whatever's occurring, though, the licensee should know about it.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think this leads into our next question, which is something that Rich mentioned in the work group, and then we chatted about more, which is with this program and his hope to build a culture of trust between licensees and the agencies, and his like strong belief that it goes both ways.
Yes.
So I realize I'm asking you to speak for Rich at this moment, which is a big task. But have you talked with him about that? Can you explain about what it means really to go both ways, and what we can do as licensees and what we can expect from the agency? Do you have thoughts, Rich?
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Well, he has kind of talked about that, but I'm just going to go off of my personal experience.
Sorry, Shannon type thoughts are great too.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course I don't want to speak for Rich. But I'm just going to go off of like my experience working in the field. So when I was on the alcohol side, it really does go both ways. When I worked downtown Portland in the downtown entertainment district, working with licensees. it was a partnership. And when, you know, I'd speak with them about things, or I'd talk with them about concerns that we had that rose to the level of public safety, they would talk and they would, you know, give me what their solutions were. And sometimes the solutions didn't correct the activity. And then there would be some type of compliance action that would have to take place. And that's where I want to touch on in terms of no surprises. When there was a violation issued to those licensees, it was not a surprise. And that's really what we want to work on the marijuana side as well. I will say that there is some activity that is outside of, we're not the only agency that works, you know, that investigates these. So sometimes there's things that go on that we don't know about, and we don't know about them. But if it's a OLCC sanctioned and compliance action, that is what I am talking about. And in terms of going both ways, I would say that, you know, I kind of talked about it before, but, you know, I guess the reason why I talked about the communication piece from the inspectors is because that's what we're really working with the compliance team to communicate and help the licensees be successful. But then I also want to hear from the licensees to the inspector about concerns that they have. And, you know, if there's issues, we want to hear about them. I mean, I want to hear, you know, that, you know, if something just doesn't sound right, I really think it's important for there to be a two-way street.
I think, and just to clarify what you mean there, are you saying that, like, if a licensee is concerned or unclear about what's happening with their inspector, it'd be good to reach out higher up in the agency? Is that or to the inspector?
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of both. I think that, you know, our inspectors are doing a good job of communicating with licensees. But I also think that if a licensee has a concern with what they're being, what the inspector is talking with them about, I think the first step is for the licensee to talk with the inspector about it. And then if there are issues, to bring those forward to management if there's just something that seems really far out in left field, and then we can evaluate it and go forward from there. Because let's face it, I mean, there are things that happen in the field that we may or may not know about, and unless we hear about it, we're not going to be able to correct it or fix it.
Yeah, that's great. That's good to hear. And I know that Rich, I believe at the work group said that same thing, that we can reach out to him, and you can always reach out to me, and I can connect you. Mm-hmm. Cool. We're gonna take switch gears just a little bit. It looks like we're still talking about VOC in our question timeline, but we have some other questions that were brought forward from the committee about when stuff doesn't fall outside of the timeline. Yeah, I'm going to give Shannon just a minute to breathe. I really appreciate you jumping on this call and chatting with me for so long. It's great to get this information out. And I as much as I could go a week without another Zoom meeting, I'm really glad that we can use this platform to connect all around the state. Thanks everyone for logging in around the state. I'm going to give a quick plug for our next member meeting, which is January 27th. And we're going to have an awesome way for everyone to come together and network during the meeting. I shouldn't say everyone, only OCA members. So if you're not a member, hit me up. So that'll be our next meeting on January 27th. And now let's jump. That was my intermission. I feel like I should have like a song, a dance, or cartoon show, but that's all I got. It's just some association plugs. So we have a couple more questions here that came in from Reform Committee. Again, thank you to those folks who volunteered to help me and help the association move forward with this work. And then it's also we'll have a little bit of time. We have about half an hour left in our discussion. So if there's any other questions that you would like to submit, there's that Q&A box down there below. And so far, knock on wood, if we've done a pretty good job, if I do say so myself, of answering those questions. So send them our way, and I'll keep doing my best to get them in there. Shannon, the next part of our talk is we have some questions about when things don't don't fall under the VOC program. And so when something is a violation, we'd like to get your perspective on the process and advice for licensees and how to best handle the situation. And again, I love the idea that during this whole situation, nothing is a surprise to them. But our folks, our members, really want to know, like, what are their rights? How should they handle themselves in the violation process? So one of the first questions we got, and we talked about this a little bit on the phone, is can a licensee ask for their attorney to be present during an inspection? And then the follow-up to that is how must they comply with the inspector, and do they have the right to remain silent?
Yeah, so in the very beginning, this actually came up quite a bit. We asked for and received Department of Justice advice from the DOJ, and we actually, Shannon Hoffeditz, I don't know if you are familiar with who she is or not, but she's one of the DOJs that represents our agency. Her and I spoke at a continuing law education conference in Bend, and this question did come up. So the question has come up that some licensees are being instructed that they to essentially invoke their Fifth Amendment right during an investigation. And so one of the things that I really want to be clear on is these are administrative violations that we are following up on. I think I'm not an attorney, I'm going to say that right now, but my understanding is the Fifth Amendment right applies to criminal law. Administrative law, licensees have a recreational marijuana license that OLCC has administrative authority over. And so, and I'm going to actually read this because I think it's really important. Licensees are required to cooperate with an investigation, OAR 845-025-8560 sub 2, refusal to talk to OLCC staff directly when contacted, refusal to allow OLCC staff to talk to employees, failure to provide information requested by OLCC staff in a timely manner, and failure to allow OLCC access to the premises are all grounds for determining that a licensee is not cooperating with an investigation, which is a violation of OAR 845-025-8560 and could lead to an enforcement action against you. So what I want to say is that I really think that we do try to be reasonable. So if an inspector is at a location and if a licensee or the representative wants to get an attorney on the phone or say, hey, my attorney can be here in 5 or 10 minutes, that's reasonable, but it's not reasonable for the inspector to be sitting around and waiting for an attorney to get there. And so that's one of the things where the inspector will work with you to determine what that timeline will look like. But again, failure to cooperate with an investigation could lead to additional sanctions, which we don't want. But I wanted to be, this question has come up time and time again, and any conferences or any presentations that I do, I constantly bring this up because it has continuously come up, and I just want to be sure that we can spread the message and inform everybody to the best of our ability of what those requirements are.
What if there was a way, some folks just, and we're all working on it, right? But there is like a history with not the best communication, but between the agency and licensees, and vice versa. So what if someone felt like they really wanted their attorney there? What if they could freeze all operations, not just stop everything? Cameras would be watching, no funny business, just freeze everything until their attorney showed up.
Well, my understanding is it needs to be a reasonable amount of time. I mean, it can't be any length of time. It needs to be, they need to immediately cooperate with the investigation. And it's that definition of what requiring to cooperate with the investigation, it's that timeline of what that looks like. And so the advice, like I said, that we got from DOJ, I don't think it matters whether or not things are frozen or not. It's we're there to ask questions and they need to be answered.
And the licensee is responsible for answering all those questions at that time. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And they could have their attorney like on the phone or
Yes.
FaceTime.
Absolutely.
And what if sometimes, I know this has come up, well, it just comes up because we're small business owners, right? What if the right person isn't there? Like, what if the farmer has like gone to another site to work on the job? How does that language fit into those kind of situations? What's the expectation there?
Yeah, so we're there to conduct an investigation, and if there's no pre-appointment or if there's not a meeting scheduled, sometimes, we do make pop-in visits to try to contact somebody. And if, Kim, if you came and approached me and I didn't know the answer to the questions, I'm surely not going to answer them because I don't know, and that would be what my response was. But then if it was later determined that I did know and I answered I didn't know to try to prevent an action, that's where the issue comes in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're saying whoever's on, now I'm going to get in trouble with my lawyer friends, but are you saying that whoever is on the premises is required to answer to the best of their knowledge, but you're not necessarily required to have the right person to answer at the premises?
No, what I'm saying, sorry, I think we're getting a little off course here. So ultimately, the licensee is responsible for the acts and actions of their employees that work for them on the premises. So if there is an investigation, the inspector is going to know who they need to talk to. And so if they're asking questions of employees or of a licensee or licensee's representative, bottom line is just be as honest as you can about the situation. And if you need to get your attorney present, you can get them on the phone right away, then that is fine. I mean, we're not going to stop you from doing that.
And the licensee doesn't necessarily need to be present all the time for a pop-in inspection.
That is correct. Yeah, no, they don't need to be. I mean, the whole goal is, if I had a business, I'd want to have people I can trust they're working and running it.
Yeah. The one last question on this topic, unless I get any more from the group, is it okay to record the interaction? I mean, we have cameras, but like, if you're not sure, is it okay to record the interview?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we don't have anything to hide. I mean, the question has come up, and the bottom line is you're being recorded all the time in marijuana businesses anyway, so there's no harm in being recorded. In fact, like I said, we have nothing to hide about that. Yeah,
that's good. Yeah, and I think, like, just to circle back on the employee piece of it, I think, and again, like going back to, I think it's just that, like, it will improve as we build a culture of trust and more communication back and forth. I think it's like, our laborers, our farmers, our trimmers don't necessarily know everything that's going on, and knowing what if the owner is not present, what they're supposed to say at the time, what they're responsible for and not responsible for. I think some clarity around that would be really helpful. Which, if you have it now, or we can follow up later to get more of it.
Yeah, I think following up later might be good on this topic. I mean, bottom line is if people are asked, if employees are asked questions and they know the answers, they just need to be as truthful as possible.
Great, cool. I felt we got a little intense there, but thank you so much. I think this is a good issue to hash out. And again, I think it just goes back to people like being nervous, right? There's always you don't know what you don't know, and so you want to be prepared for every situation. So now still in the violation process, so it goes through the violation. Occasionally we have questions come up around the case presenter, and I know that they're the next step in the process. Can you describe what the case presenter's role is?
Yeah, so if there is a case so I'm going to talk about the different levels of violations, or of compliance action, I should say. So there's verbal instructions, which I'm at a business, I verbally talk to somebody, remind them what the laws and rules are, I write it up and it gets filed, in the licensee's file. Then we've added verification of compliance, which I've talked about already. So that has been added as another compliance action. And then there's warning and violations. And so anything that's a warning or a violation, it gets written up. Part of that is going out and potentially interviewing or interviewing folks at the licensed business. And then the inspector will author a report. And as a result of that report, it gets forwarded over to the Administrative Hearings Division. What happens is then the case gets assigned to a case presenter. The case presenter will evaluate the report if the charges are supported, and then going forward, the case presenter will issue what's called a charge letter, which is what the proposed violations are. So after that charge letter is issued, I think I mentioned earlier that at the bottom, there's a case presenter that's been assigned and who has issued what those charges are. It's really out of compliance's hands because most of the times when there's that charge letter issued, that's when the licensee will have representation on that particular charge and that case. And so any questions that the inspector will have regarding that case will get deferred to the case presenter since it's in their hands. So charge letter comes out, there's directions in the charge letter. Depending on the attorney may either request a hearing or work with the case presenter. There have been some settlement discussions. There have been some, let's just resolve this, or paying the fine, or serving the suspension and going that route. But that's kind of the 10,000-foot overview of what that process looks like.
Great. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. I got caught chatting in the chat box while you're talking. No, that's great. The final question on this kind of violation process is about timelines, and we have talked about this timeline issue already, and like hopefully the VOC is able to hopefully the VOC is able to cut down some of this timeline. But do you see, is there a statute of limitations on violations? We know that, this summer some violations went out that were a couple of years old. Is it possible, do you see a day where we can get notifications like within the 90-day time frame that we have camera footage for? What's your hope for that?
I, not being the director of the Administrative Hearings Division, I don't want to speak on behalf of my colleague, Kelly Rout. That's something we can definitely get back. I do know that we can get back to this group, but I do know that that is an area that we are trying to improve on, is speeding up that timeline that we are seeing now. Great.
We'll follow up on that. We'll have another, that'll be our next fireside chat, I suppose. And this might be one for them too. Going back to that violation process, is there anyone that has authority to make changes once the violation has been issued, or once it's issued, is it going down the pipe?
Yeah, charge letters do get amended. So, I mean, that's the thing with what I have seen, that charge letters have been withdrawn. I've seen that they've been amended. They've been added to. I've just seen it again. That's really, if you wanted to have a larger discussion about that process, that would be with my colleague, Kelly Rout. I don't know enough about it, but I can tell you that I have seen them changed.
But it's on that end where it happens, not on the not on the complaints. Okay, great, sweet, thanks. Well, if there's no questions on this, we're gonna skip to, I think this is our last section of questions. Thank you so much, Shannon, for going through this process with us, and thanks again for stepping up at the last minute for Rich, who we hope is feeling better soon. This question came ahead of time from our enforcement committee, And I'm afraid it's still about violations. We just are really stuck on that topic. So if a formal violation is issued to a licensee, the rules provide for mitigation if the licensee makes a good faith effort to prevent the violation or engages in extraordinary cooperation. Can you define, and we haven't been able to find a lot of language on what those terms exactly mean. Do you have a definition for you on what those means and what type of behavior activity we could do to demonstrate good faith efforts?
Yeah, so a lot of times what we look at is willingness and ability. Sometimes licensees will have the willingness, but because of the repeated discussions with them, they may not have the ability because the problem is still occurring. Or like you said, maybe somebody went above and beyond and they brought the information forward that could potentially be a mitigating factor. I'm just gonna I'm gonna switch over to the alcohol side and just kind of talk about some of the examples that we've seen there, and maybe this can help put it in perspective. So for example, we have a handful of licensees that say, I don't care about the freeze, we're gonna continue to operate no matter what. We don't care what OLCC says, we don't care what OHA says. And
heard about them. I can't imagine any cannabis folks even considering that kind of behavior. Go on. But, okay, go ahead.
I'm just trying to give a very clear example here. Yeah. And we don't care what OSHA says. So for example, you know, is that, I wouldn't say that there's any mitigation there, and that's not something that we'd necessarily entertain in terms of, you know, necessarily working with a licensee. It's just like there's, you know, what is the licensees? It really, each case is uniquely different. And so, you know, I really don't want to say there's definitive answers on what mitigation is, because each case, I saw in the chat that, you know, there's a lot of rules that, you know, there's different meanings to the rules, and depending on the set of circumstances, on, you know, on definitely determining how they apply. It's just, it's really hard unless there's, you know, we really have to look at each case on a case-by-case basis and look at the totality of the facts to determine, you know, really what is considered aggravation. Did it happen multiple days in a row? Was it intentional? Who conducted the activity? Or mitigating factors, meaning, you know, I don't even, you know, the mitigating factors, it was unintentional, or I don't even want to say unintentional. Because again, that would be for my colleague, this is Kelly Rout, this is really her bailiwick, but it's just really hard to put a bow on what mitigation and aggravation looks like.
Yeah, and I know it's hard, and I appreciate you trying to walk the line with that. It's hard to, because we want to know what we want to do what we can to, like, you know, protect our businesses. Are you aware of any, like, how the inspectors are trained on this issue, or how, you know, how are we are there like SOPs for dealing with these kind of gray areas? Is there messaging that goes out to your staff about that?
Yeah, so we really, the direction to our inspectors is to gather the facts of, so if a complaint comes in, go out and gather the facts surrounding the complaint. And sometimes additional things will be added to that because there's other things that are discovered. But, you know, what we look at is the willingness and the ability of the licensee to work with us. I mean, we're willing to work with a licensee that works with us. And my hope is some of you folks that are on this call, that holds true with your experiences. If not, I want to hear about it. But, you know, I will tell you that we have received some concerns about some of the activity that we've seen in the field, and we do try to address those, again, on a case-by-case basis. And if we're starting to see trends by the licensees that don't really fit within or with the inspectors that don't fit within our scope, you know, we'll have discussions and try to have those talks with them. And I think I got sidetracked.
Yeah, no, I think you circle back a little bit to it. I mean, I think this is always going to come up, right? It's if this situation happens, it's a tense situation, and if it's someone who's putting in a good faith effort, it's someone who's honestly trying to do the right thing, and something has happened, for whatever reasons. I think that's what makes it hard. It seems like, and it's probably because they're the people that have the attorneys to push it forward, but it seems like there's a lot more that aggravation is charged, but not, we've yet to see a lot of those mitigation charges. Are you familiar with that step of it, or is that more of a next step?
That's more of a next step. That's more the Administrative Hearings Division.
Yeah.
I mean, the goal of the inspectors is, like I said, it's write the reports. I mean, I've read a lot of police reports in my time, and if somebody is really cooperative, we tend to, put that in the report. If they're not, more times than not, the non-cooperative piece is in there. But I think it goes without saying that if 99% of our licensees are cooperative, there's a small amount that aren't, and then that is pretty noticeable, I would say, in the reports.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And I appreciate that. And I think that's human nature, right? Is just to remember the intense situations more strongly than the not. I want to there's a couple more questions, and thank you so much for sticking with this. This is as we have to hash these things out. It's so helpful to hear the agency's perspective and to hear your perspective. And just to circle back on thanking you for working with us, and that idea of no one should be surprised, right? So hopefully we get to a point where we know ahead of time what's going on.
You are right. The aggravation mitigation piece, that is really, I know that I danced around that, but it really is a fine line, and really depends on the totality of everything.
Yeah.
Of the facts. Just
the facts, ma'am. Yeah. We I think that's definitely something we as an association are gonna push more. So I think maybe that's the next step for us, is try to get some more clarification around that piece. One last question from our committee, and there's a couple more questions from the Q&A that we may get to. And I think this goes back to maybe that talk in the chat about some rules are kind of gray a little bit, up to interpretation on how folks look at them. Part of our concern over enforcement reform is that the licensees fear of being in violation despite their best efforts to stay compliant. On the alcohol side, things have been set for decades, and cannabis regulations are still growing and adapting, and a lot of things lack precedent. So often, I'll get messages from members who will get one answer from one inspector, and they'll get another answer from another inspector. And I think it's just this thing hasn't been decided yet. So something I hear of, and something I personally dream of, is some kind of wiki database that tracks rule interpretations. I understand that may take some time and money to accomplish, but what is your advice for licensees who are struggling? We have a lot of folks who are kind of probably self-proclaimed compliance nerds, who are trying their best to follow these things, but it's really hard to get a clear answer sometimes.
Yeah, so for those of you that are not aware, we have, so one of the things that we talk about is consistency. So we have the inspectors that work across the state. For any of the reports that come in that go over to AHD, they all get filtered through Mandy Standiford, who's a compliance technician. So that's really between myself communicating with the management team and with Mandy. Mandy reviews all those reports, and we try to gain consistency. So the other thing that we are really working on is gaining consistency with the answers that we're providing. So if there is anybody out there that does get two different answers, then I would encourage you to reach out to myself or Rich, because what we want to do is make sure that, again, we can't fix something unless we know it's broken. And unbeknownst to you, it may be the same two people that are always involved in this, or providing different information. What we're going to do is we're going to look at that information that you provide to us and fix it, because that shouldn't be happening. We should all be on the same page. But unfortunately, our agency has grown at such a rapid rate that we're not perfect, but we can't fix things unless we hear about them. So I would encourage you to reach out to Rich and I, and then we can reach out to the managers of the staff that are involved to get the problem resolved and look into it.
That's great. Yeah. And we know about rapid growth. And I think, I'm trying to like, put our industry in perspective for folks in the regulatory framework of what we have done and accomplished in 5 years. And it's not perfect, but we're growing. We're doing our best. Do you think is there talk about some kind of database that both licensees and inspectors could share that has like, judgments for cases and interpretations of rules that always come up in these kinds of conversations?
I actually made a note, and that's something that I'm going to talk to Rich about.
Oh, cool. Well, great. Yeah. Well, let me know if we want to talk more about it. I bet we have some folks that would be glad to help out. I think that's part of like building that culture of trust as we all learn together. And if we all have the same resources to look at to get answered questions, it's helpful, right?
Yeah, the issue with that is, as with anything, is, you can have the Q&A and then rules change and then the answers may change, and it's a matter of keeping all of that information up.
Yeah, current as of this date, disclaimers. Yeah. We have just we're getting short on time, and just a couple of questions from the Q&A. Again, Shannon, thank you so much for your time. This I know the answer to, but I think because it's being answered, it's good to just get the question out there. So someone has asked in the Q&A, are inspectors allowed to carry firearms?
The answer is no.
It's great. And I think that's it. And if that case comes up, I'm sure that they should just reach out to you or Rich.
Yes.
The follow up to the question on education for licensees, Sarah has asked, will there be any OLCC rule update workshops happening via webinar, perhaps a Zoom event? I've gone to these workshops in person when they were offered, and they're extremely helpful in being clear on new and existing rules.
That I do not know the answer to, but I can definitely work with, so Madeline Kane is our new rules coordinator. I can talk with her about if there's new rule packages that come out, or, when would be a good time for this to occur, if that's something that the agency is willing to entertain. So I wrote that down as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I think this is like, the more that we can do these kind of things, like we're happy to facilitate, and we're happy to spread the information far and wide. And we so appreciate your willingness to come and answer these questions. Some of them easy, some of them more difficult. So we are getting towards the end of our time here, and two plugs before I run into my string of thank yous. For those of you that logged on late or just really enjoy hearing me ramble on, this will be posted on the OCA's YouTube channel, so you can rewatch it, you can share it with your friends and family, and that will go out in a newsletter as soon as it's posted, so probably early next week. Next month, the 27th, we have a members event, another virtual event like this. We're really excited. Our membership committee is putting together a way for all of us to like chat with each other and network. And I'm very excited to see all your faces. So stay tuned for that. And we also have a DEI training, diversity, equity, and inclusion training for cannabis businesses that we're holding in January. You can check out our website for more information on that. I really, again, Shannon, thank you. Please send our thanks on to Rich and the rest of the agency for working with us and for listening to the industry. This started with the industry work group coalitions that were called over the summer. And from there, I'm so appreciative of our ability to have these frank conversations and work toward an industry that grows for the good of everybody. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share with the group?
No, I want to reiterate what I've already said, is I really appreciate the feedback and the information that we are receiving from the industry, because it's a two-way street. I know sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but we really are working on making it that way. And I'm hoping that verification of compliance is just one step the right direction for the industry, and that we can just continue to grow from there.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. And you know, that sentiment is good for us, is good for business, is good for industry growth, and that's why originally Rich was going to come on, and I'm so thankful for you for stepping up at the last minute. I know that's like intense to do. I think you probably just had a couple hours to prepare.
Yeah,
thank
it was
you.
kind of last minute, but that's okay.
You're a hero, and you've gotten lots of love in the chat and from my text messages. So thank you once again. Thanks to everyone that's watching. Yeah, I'm gonna stop rambling and just say goodnight. Shannon, I hope you have some way to relax now.
Well, I really, again, thank you for everybody. I'm seeing some of the notes in the chat, and I agree. Let's keep the lines of communication open, because it really is a two-way street. So you have Rich's information, you have my information. You could always use Kim as a segue to get to us as well. So
yeah, I'm happy to, if you need to be anonymous or whatever it is, I'm happy to help field those questions too. But
yeah, so really thank you to everybody, and if I don't talk to you all, have a great holiday.
Yeah, you too. Take care, everyone.
Yeah,
Stay safe.
bye.
Bye-bye.